Hey everyone! Today I'm going to be showing you how to crochet Patrick the Sheep, made from the coziest yarns of fortune and flecked with the warmth of care. The snuggliest luck charm is not just your everyday woolly wanderer. So Patrick can be made in sport, DK, or plush yarn by adjusting your hook size. Today I'm going to be crocheting with worsted weight yarn and a 4mm crochet hook. If you haven't already, be sure to snag the matching greeting card to make an adorable and one-of-a-kind gift that your friends and family will love. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. So today we're going to be working on Patrick the Sheep's pattern, and we're going to begin with his body and working with this light brown yarn color. So before we get started, we need to review how to form a magic ring. So let's review. Okay, so let's review how to tie a magic loop. So to start, we're going to get about 5 inches of our tail of our working yarn. And then we need to form a bit of a finger guns here with our left hand. And then we're going to lay that tail so that the tail part of it is down over the bottom digit of our left hand. And then we're going to take our thumb and pinch that tail so it's on securely to our index and our middle finger. Then we're going to take the working yarn, and that's the yarn that's attached to the ball of yarn. And we're going to wrap it around the back side of those 2 fingers, really close to the top digit. So I'm just wrapping around the back. And then I'm going to continue by pulling it behind my thumb. So I just made a big loop around my fingers. Then we're going to wrap a second time, but this time we're going to go around the lower digit on the back side of our left hand. And then one last time we're going to push that working yarn behind our thumb on our left hand. Then when we've done that, we can take our crochet hook and we're going to flip our left hand over so we can see those 2 loops that we formed. And then taking our crochet hook underneath that top loop, we're going to use the hook to grab that bottom loop and pull it underneath the top loop. Then when we've done that, we're going to flip our hands back over away from our body. And then bring our hook and our left hand together. So you can see my fingers on my right hand are touching the back side of the hand with the loops on it. Then I'm going to take my right index finger and thumb, and I'm going to grab those loops that are on the back side of my hand. So the one on the hook and the one on my hand. Once I've got those pinched rather securely, I'm going to let go with my thumb and then slide all of those loops very carefully off of my hand. Once I've done that, you can see I have my tail. Again, that's not attached to the ball of yarn. And then my working yarn. I'm going to move my tail out of my way, kind of just swing it around clockwise to the 12 o'clock position. And then I'm going to grab my working yarn and begin tensioning it by laying it over my left index finger and then grabbing the remaining yarn with my pinky and my ring finger. Then we need to be able to tension our yarn, so we're going to have to let go with our right hand. But before we do, we need to make sure we're pinching the loop that we've tied and our tail together. So if you look, I like to kind of pinch so that it sandwiches that working yarn. So I'm just going to pinch both that loop and that tail together here. And then when I've done that, I can let go with my right hand, and pulling my index finger up lets me tighten that loop on my hook. Then to lock our magic loop or magic ring in place, we can yarn over and draw through the loop on our hook. And that locks everything in place. You can let go with your left hand. You can even stop tensioning if you want. This loop isn't going to go anywhere now that we've locked it in place. One last thing that I like to do before I get started is I'll take the tail. You can see it's sort of threaded through the loop that we've made. I like to take this tail and pull it out so that I can go ahead and get started placing single crochet inside. Before you begin, we also need to make sure we are working both in the loop and over the tail of the magic ring as well. Alright, so we are ready to make our first single crochet stitch. Alright, so now that we've reviewed how to tie our magic ring, we're ready to go ahead and get started here on round 1, which if you look in the top left-hand corner, you'll be able to see the pattern's instructions kind of track with us as we go. Alright, so for round 1, we need to put 8 SC in MR. What that means is we need to place 8 single crochet stitches inside of our magic ring, and that number in the parentheses at the very end, that's how many stitches we're going to have when we get to the end of round 1. So remember, when we're working in our magic ring, we're going to be putting our single crochet stitches in both the ring itself and underneath the tail as well. So I like to hold the tail behind the ring, so I'm working over both of them. So let's start by placing our first single crochet stitch. I'm going to take my hook, and from front to back, I'm going to run it through both the ring and the tail. So I set the tail over the hook itself. Then I'm going to take my working yarn and I'm going to yarn under, meaning I'm going to put the yarn underneath my hook. And then using that hook part, I'm going to draw the working yarn through the ring and then up into a nice tall loop on my hook. Then to finish my single crochet stitch, I'm going to yarn over, meaning I'm going to put the yarn over my hook and then draw that yarn through both of the loops left on my crochet hook. That forms our first single crochet stitch, and we need to mark that stitch as well. So if we turn our work on the side, you can see it forms this sort of V shape. We're going to mark it by taking our stitch marker and slipping it through both sides of that V shape. So there's our first single crochet stitch. We're going to continue adding single crochet stitches until we have a total of 8. So again, we'll take our hook, go through the ring and underneath the tail, yarn under and draw up a loop, then yarn over and draw through both, and that forms our second single crochet stitch. We're going to just keep adding stitches until we have 8. Alright, I have all 8 of my single crochet stitches, and you can double check that you have the correct amount by turning your work on the side and counting those V shapes and not counting this loop here on our hook. This loop isn't actually a stitch, it's sort of like a stitch in progress. Once you have all 8 of your single crochet stitches added, we can do the magic part of our magic ring by pulling that tail that we've been working over and pulling pretty tightly. It'll close that first round off and form sort of a circle shape. Alright, so that sets us up for round 2, where we need to put 8 INC stitches in this round. So to translate that, INC means an increase, and an increase is where we put 2 single crochet stitches in the same stitch from the previous round. So to start, we're going to take our stitch marker out, and then we're going to put 2 single crochet stitches in the stitch that our marker was just in. So to work in a stitch and not in the magic ring, we're going to take our hook and go underneath both sides of that little V, just like we did when we marked it. And then from here, it's exactly the same. We'll yarn under, pull through that stitch we just pushed our hook through, and pull up a nice tall loop. Then yarn over and draw through both loops on our hook. We also need to mark that stitch that we just created, since it's the first of the round. And then to finish our increase, we need to go through that exact same stitch from round 1. So we're going to push our hook through that same hole and make a second single crochet stitch. So you can see that makes 2 of these little V shapes coming out of the same stitch from the previous round. So if you look at the end of our instructions here in the top left, you'll see in the parentheses the number 16. We're going to have 16 stitches at the end of round 2 because we're doubling the 8 stitches from round 1. So we'll continue increasing. We're going to work in our next stitch, which is the next V shape when you kind of rotate along here. So I'm going to push my hook through, yarn under and draw up a loop, then yarn over and draw through 2. Then repeat that again. And then we're going to continue increasing in this way in each stitch until we are all the way around round 2. Alright, that wraps up round 2. Before we move on to round 3, I like to pull my magic ringtail one final time and then trim it short. You can discard the tail that we just cut. I like to do that because it keeps it out of my way as I keep working around. Alright, we're ready for round 3. We've got a new kind of skill that we need to learn here. So if you look in the top left-hand corner, you'll see we've got this parentheses, and inside it says 1 SC, comma, 1 INC. So to translate that, that means in the next stitch we're going to place 1 single crochet, and in the stitch after we need to place an increase. And then outside of those parentheses we have the multiplication sign and the number 8. That's telling us we need to repeat everything in the parentheses in the order it appears 8 times to have 24 stitches at the end of round 3. So let's dive right in and try that out. We'll start by putting 1 single crochet stitch in the first stitch of the round. And of course mark that single crochet because it's the first stitch of the round. Then we'll make our increase in the next stitch. And that wraps up everything in those parentheses 1 time, so let's do that 7 more times until we are all the way around round 3. Alright, that wraps up round 3 for me. I'm ready for round 4. And if you look round 4, we've got another set of parentheses that we need to repeat. So this time we're going to put 1 single crochet stitch in the next 2 stitches of the round and then increase. So here's my first single crochet stitch. I'll put 1 more single crochet stitch in the stitch right after. And then I'm going to increase. And that's 1 repetition of those parentheses. We'll do that another 7 times for a total of 8 all the way around. Alright, so that wraps up round 4 for me. I'm ready for round 5, where we're going to start by putting 1 single crochet stitch in the first stitch of the round. And we'll follow that with an increase. And then we've got our next parentheses pattern where we're going to put 1 single crochet stitch in the next 3 stitches of the round, and then an increase. And then we're going to repeat that 7 times total until we get to the last 2 stitches of our round. So let's go ahead and start in on that. So there are my 3 single crochet stitches, and here's my increase. And I'll keep repeating that sequence until the last 2 stitches of the round. Alright, so I'm at my last 2 stitches of this round. I'll go ahead and put 1 single crochet in each. And that wraps up round 5. So for round 6, we're going to start by putting 1 single crochet stitch in the first 4 stitches of the round. And then follow that with an increase. And then we're going to repeat that sequence another 7 times for a total of 8 all the way around. Alright, so that's round 6 done. For round 7, we're going to be working in a special part of the stitch. So far, when we've been crocheting, we've been working through both sides of this little V shape that forms the top of our stitch. So the V shape is both the front and back loop of the stitch. For round 7, we're going to be just working in the back loop, which is the one here closest to the back side of our work, the side that our magic ringtail is kind of just hanging out on. So as we're working all of the stitches in this next round, we're only going to be working in those back loops, the back side of that V. So for round 7, we're going to be placing the first 7 single crochet stitches of the round in the back loop. So let's go ahead and work those first couple together. So again, just push your hook through the center of that V and grab just the back loop. And then work your single crochet stitch as normal. You can see it leaves the front loop behind. That's how you know you've done it correctly. We're going to be coming back for those front loops too. So there are my first 7 single crochet stitches. So then we need to increase in the next stitch. And then we're going to repeat that sequence working in the back loops all the way around another 5 times for a total of 6 repetitions. Alright, so I just wrapped up round 7. For rounds 8 through 11, we're going to just be working 1 single crochet stitch in each of the back loops only. So we're just going to be working around all 54 stitches of this round and the next couple of rounds, placing 1 single crochet stitch in each back loop. So I will see you whenever I get a little closer to wrapping up the end of round 11. Alright, so I just wrapped up the end of round 11, and it's time to get our safety eyes placed. So they're going to go in between rounds 3 and 4. So if you count from your magic ring, 1, 2, 3, it's the space between rounds 3 and 4 here. And they need to have about 6 single crochet stitches in between them. So I went ahead and already placed my safety eyes. I just counted out between rounds 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then placed them along that round so that there would be about 6 single crochet stitches in between. You can of course move them to be wherever you'd like them to be whenever you place them. You can also embroider the eyes. In fact, it might be a good idea if you're planning on giving this plushie to a small child or a pet. But once you've got them placed in the place that you like them, you can go ahead and snap the backs on the back side. Alright, so I've got the backs in place and I'm ready to continue crocheting. And we're going to pick up right where we left off, which was on round 12, where we're going to be working back inside of both sides of the stitch. We're going to be putting 1 single crochet stitch in each stitch all the way around. Alright, so for round 13, we're going to go ahead and place 1 single crochet stitch in each of the back loops only of this round. So just like we did when we did these rows here, we're going to be putting 1 single crochet stitch in only the back loop. Okay, so for round 14, we're going to start another sequence of repetitions, but we need to learn a new stitch. But first up, let's do what we already know. Let's put 1 single crochet stitch in the next 7 single crochet stitches. Alright, so there are my first 7 single crochet, and then we need to make a DEC, or a decrease. So to do a decrease, we're going to take our hook and go through the next stitch, yarn under, and draw up a loop. And then do that exact same thing in the stitch right after. Go through, yarn under, draw up a loop. And then we're going to yarn over and draw through all 3 of these loops left on our hook. And if you look, that takes 2 stitches from the previous round and pulls them together into one V for this round. So it decreases the amount of stitches that we have. So we're going to repeat that sequence of 7 single crochet decrease another 5 times for a total of 6 repetitions until we are all the way around. Alright, so that wraps up round 14 for me. For round 15, we're back and working in the back loop only. We're going to make one single crochet stitch in the next 6 back loops. And then one back loop only decrease. Then we're going to repeat that sequence another 5 times for a total of 6 all the way around. Alright, that wraps up round 15. For round 16, we're back in the both front and back loop. We're going to put 5 single crochet stitches in the next 5 stitches. And then follow that with a decrease. Then repeat that sequence 5 more times for a total of 6. Alright, that wraps up round 16. For round 17, we're back in the back loop only, where we're going to put 1 single crochet stitch in the next 4 back loops. And then a back loop only decrease. And then just like the last few rounds, we'll repeat that 5 more times for a total of 6 repetitions all the way around. Alright, that wraps up round 17. For round 18, we're back in the both sides of the single crochet stitch, so we'll need to place 1 single crochet in the next 3 stitches. And then a decrease. And repeat that sequence 5 more times for 6 times total. Alright, that's round 18 done. For round 19, we're back in the back loop only, where we're going to put 1 single crochet stitch in the next 2 back loops. And then a back loop only decrease. And then repeat that sequence 5 more times for 6 repetitions total. Alright, that wraps up round 19. For round 20, we're back in the front and back loop. We're going to put one single crochet stitch in the first stitch of the round, and then a decrease, and then repeat that 5 more times for a total of 6. Alright, so before we finish round 21, which is our last round, we need to stuff the body. So let's go ahead and grab some fluff and get the body stuffed. Alright, so I went ahead and stuffed the body. Let's go ahead and finish up round 21, where in the back loop only, we're going to just make 6 single crochet decreases. Alright, so I made my last back loop only decrease, so we're ready to fasten off. So to do that, we're going to take our stitch marker out, and we're going to make a slip stitch in the stitch that it was just in. So to do that, we'll go through the stitch, both front and back loop, yarn under and draw up a loop. And then we're going to pull that loop we just made through the only other loop on our hook to slip stitch. Then we'll cut a tail 6 to 7 inches of our working yarn, and pull that slip stitch all the way through by pulling our hook until the end of our working yarn goes through it. And then we can tighten that slip stitch down into a knot. Then to close off this last round that we have, those 6 stitches, we're going to take that tail that we just cut and thread it through the eye of our tapestry needle. And then we're going to sew through each of the front loops of these 6 stitches on that last round. So only get the front loop here, not the back loop like what we've been working in. And we're going to just sew through each of those front loops. Once you've sewn through all 6, you can pull tight, which will cinch that last round closed. Then we're going to tie a knot and weave our tail in. So to tie a knot, I like to loop the yarn over the surface of my work and then sew up through that loop that I've just made, which ties a knot. You have to hold the loop close to the fabric of your work, and that ties the knot. And then we're going to sew down and into the body of the sheep, and then up through just any old spot, doesn't matter where, to pull that knot to the inside and to weave our tail. Then you can unthread your tapestry needle, and by pulling that tail we just wove in tight and snipping, we can cut it, which weaves it in, and you can discard any tail you didn't use. Alright, so next up we need to get the wool attached to the body. So we're going to start by attaching to the very last front loop that we left behind. And we're going to attach on so that our hook is going from bottom to top of this stitch, so that the stitches that we're going to be working in are directly to our left. Then once we've got our hook inserted, we're going to grab our white yarn, and to fasten on, I'm going to take that yarn and I'm going to wrap it around my hook and then pull that wrap through. And then I'm going to take this tail that I've made and pull it over to the left and begin tensioning my working yarn here. And that gets us ready to make the wool. To start, we're going to chain 4 stitches. So to chain, we'll take our working yarn and pull it through the loop on our hook. That's 1 chain. So 2, 3, 4. Once we've got those 4 chains, then we're going to make 1 single crochet stitch in the next loop left behind. Then we'll chain 4, and then make another single crochet stitch in the next chain, or the next front loop only. And then we're going to just repeat this pattern of chaining 4, single crocheting in the next loop, until we are all the way around all of these front loop spirals and closer to the front of the sheep's face. So I'm going to keep working. I'll see you back here so I can show you how to fasten off once all of the wool is attached. Alright, so I have just about finished the wool here on Patrick the sheep, and I need to chain my last 4 stitches. And then I have 1 front loop left, and we're going to actually slip stitch in this last front loop to fasten off. So there's that slip stitch. So I'm ready to go ahead and cut a tail. So I'm going to cut my white working yarn. And then I'm going to pull that last slip stitch all the way through and then tighten down. And then we can weave this white tail in by threading it through the eye of our tapestry needle. And then I'm just going to send that straight into the body and out through just any place through the wool. And pull tight, unthread my tapestry needle, and then I can give that a trim. And I can also trim the tail from fastening on to the wool as well. Alright, that wraps up the wool. So let's move on to the next part of our pattern. Alright, so next up we need to make Patrick the sheep's legs. So we're going to make 2 of these. I'll walk you through how to make 1, and then you can make the second right after. So we're going to start with this light brown yarn that we used for his body and begin with a magic ring. And then for round 1, we're going to place 8 single crochet stitches inside of that magic ring. And then don't forget to mark that first stitch as well. Alright, so once you've got all 8 of your single crochet stitches inside of that magic ring, we can pull the tail tightly to close. Then we're ready for round 2, where we're going to begin by putting 1 single crochet stitch in the first stitch of the round. And then an increase in the next stitch. Then we're going to repeat that sequence 3 more times for a total of 4 repetitions. Alright, that wraps up round 2. Let's go ahead and tighten that magic ring tail one final time, and then give it a trim, and discard anything you don't use. And then we're ready for the last round of the leg, round 3, where we're going to put 1 single crochet stitch in each of the 12 stitches we made for round 2. Alright, and that wraps up the leg, so we're ready to fasten off. We can take our stitch marker out, slip stitch in the stitch it was just in, then cut a medium length tail for sewing. We're going to use this tail to attach the leg to the body. Then we can pull that slip stitch all the way through and tighten down. And then when we attach these legs, they're going to be attached sort of flattened. So I'm going to go ahead and just flatten this leg so that the tail to sew with is kind of over on one of the edges. Alright, that's one. Let's make one more and then move on to the next part of our pattern. Alright, so next up we're going to make the arms, and we need to make 2 of these. So just like with the legs, I'll show you how to make the first one, and then you need to make a second one. We'll start with that light brown yarn and forming a magic ring. Now that I've got my magic ring formed, I'm ready to start round 1, where I'll put 6 single crochet stitches inside of this magic ring. Alright, I've got all 6 stitches in my magic ring. I'm going to pull the tail. And then for rounds 2 through 5, all we'll need to do is put 1 single crochet stitch in every stitch all the way around. So don't forget to move your stitch marker up as you start the next round. And I will see you back here whenever I have wrapped up round 5 to show you how to fasten off. Alright, so I just wrapped up round 5 and I'm ready to fasten off. So I'm going to take my stitch marker out and I'm going to slip stitch to that same stitch it was just in. Then we're going to cut a medium length tail. Again, we're going to be using this to attach it onto the body. Then we're going to pull that last slip stitch through and tighten down. And just like with the legs, we're going to kind of flatten this. We're not going to stuff them. And we need to make one more before we're ready to move on to the next part of our pattern. Alright, next up we need to make the ears. Just like the arms and the legs, we need to make 2 of these, and we're starting with that light brown color and by forming a magic ring. Alright, now that I've got my magic ring formed, I'm going to place 9 single crochet stitches inside. Alright, once you've got all 9 single crochet stitches inside, you can pull the magic ring tail pretty tightly. And then our only other round is just to put 1 single crochet stitch in every stitch all the way around. So 9 single crochet. And as you add single crochet, your ear's going to start to kind of bowl a little bit, which is kind of what we want. Alright, there's my last stitch, so we're ready to fasten off. I'm going to take our stitch marker out and then slip stitch in the stitch it was just in. Then, just like before, we're going to cut a medium length tail to sew with. Pull that last slip stitch all the way through and tighten down. And then pull your magic ring tail one really tight final time, and we're going to trim it all the way off. Alright, that is one ear. Let's make one more and then move on to the next part of our pattern. Alright, so next up we're going to make the snout. So again, we're going to be working with this light brown yarn, and we need to start by forming a magic ring. Alright, and then we're ready for round 1, where we're going to put 6 single crochet stitches inside of that magic ring. Once you've got all 6 stitches, pull the magic ring tail tight to close. And we're ready to start in on round 2, where we're going to add 1 increase to each stitch of the snout. Alright, that's round 2 done. I'm going to pull my magic ring tail one final time, and then of course trim it just like I've done with most of my things so far. Then for round 3, we're going to put 1 single crochet stitch in every stitch all the way around. Alright, that was the last stitch of round 3 for me, so we're ready to fasten off. We can take our stitch marker out, slip stitch to the next stitch, and then leave a medium length tail to sew with. Then go ahead and pull that last slip stitch all the way through and tighten down. So there's the snout. We're ready to go ahead and start assembling the body. Alright, so we're going to start by attaching the snout to Patrick the sheep's face, and then once we've attached it, we're going to sew the nose onto the snout. I find it's a lot easier to center the nose after the snout has already been attached through a lot of trial and error. So let's start by taking our tapestry needle and threading our tail from the snout through it. And then we're going to whip stitch the snout on so that it's basically centered right over that magic ring from Patrick's face. And we're going to just whip stitch by grabbing a little of the fabric of the head and then one of the stitches of the outside of the snout. And we're going to whip stitch about half of the way around and then put a little stuffing underneath the snout so that we can stuff it and then continue sewing. Alright, so I have 6 of the stitches sewn on of the snout. I'm going to go ahead and grab a little stuffing and put it underneath the snout now. You don't need very much, probably just a little pinch. We're going to wedge it right underneath the snout and then pull any extra out. Then when you've got that stuffing in place, you can continue whip stitching around, being careful to keep the stuffing underneath the snout. Alright, I have sewn all the way around the snout. I'm ready to go ahead and fasten off. So to do that, I'm going to tie a surface knot. So I'm going to loop the yarn that I've used to sew the snout on over the surface of the snout, and then grab just a little of the fabric of the snout and sew up through that loop. Then I'm going to hold that loop close to the body of the work and pull my working yarn until it ties a knot. And then I'm going to weave this tail in by sewing it down and into the fabric of the body, and then just out through a random place. I'm going to pull, which pulls that knot inside, and also weaves that tail in. Then I can unthread my tapestry needle, and then holding that tail close to the fabric of my work, I can give it a snip to cut it. And that attaches the snout. So let's get the nose embroidered on next. We're going to take a little bit of black embroidery floss. Alright, so I have a little bit of embroidery floss on my embroidery needle, and I went ahead and tied a knot here at the end. So we're going to sew up into the snout, and we're going to come out basically directly in the center of that magic ring we used to start the snout. So sew through the bottom of the snout and then up through the center of that magic ring. And then pull really tightly to send the knot from your embroidery floss to the inside of the snout. I'm also going to trim that tail from the knot as well. There. Alright, so now that we have that, we can sew the top part of the nose, which is like a little V that's going to come out from the center here. So I'm going to sew into the space between rounds 2 and 3 of the snout, and then over to the other side of the snout, just like this. Then I'm going to sew back down through that same magic ring opening. And I'm going to sew basically a Y shape here. So I'm going to come up between rounds 2 and 3 on the bottom of the snout. And that makes the top part of the nose. And then we'll sew one long straight stitch up from the bottom of the snout to form the bottom of the mouth. Then I'm going to send my embroidery needle down to where the snout meets the body. So you can see that sews the nose on. And then I'm going to tie another surface knot here, right where the snout meets the body. And I'm going to weave that embroidery floss in just like I did with the yarn from the snout. Unthread my embroidery needle, pull close and trim. And that is the snout attached. Let's go ahead and get the rest of the parts attached now, starting with the legs. So go ahead and grab both of the legs that you've made. And we're going to start by, of course, flattening our leg out and then threading it through the eye, the yarn left over through the eye of our yarn needle. And the legs are going to be attached sort of around round 9 of the body. Hard to see with all of the fluff, so I find I kind of just move the fluff out of my way and kind of wedge the leg underneath the right eye here. Then when you've got it attached, or when you've got it placed, we're going to just whip stitch it on, grabbing just the fabric of the body. Try not to get any of the wool as you whip stitch it on. I'm just going to go back and forth, attaching the leg. Alright, once you've got the leg fully sewn on, we're going to tie another surface knot. And then weave that tail in. And then trim. And that attaches one of the legs. Let's go ahead and repeat that on the other side with the other leg. Alright, so that's both of the feet attached. Let's go ahead and get the arms attached next. So just like with the feet, we're going to fold the arms in half. And then to attach them, I like to sew them on about the same round and then about even with the nose. So they're fairly close to where the legs are. So go ahead and thread that tail from the arm through your tapestry needle. And then just like with the leg, we're going to whip stitch them on, being really careful not to catch any of the wool. Then when you have the arm attached, you can go ahead and tie another surface knot. And then we can weave that tail in and trim. So that's one of the arms attached. Let's repeat that on the other side with the other arm. Alright, that is the other arm attached. Last up, let's go ahead and get the ears attached. So the ears sort of make this bowl shape, which is what we want. We want this to be facing front as well, because that's like the inside of the ear. So let's go ahead and get that threaded through our yarn needle. And then we're going to be attaching them by sewing them down through that same row that we put the arms and the legs. And they're going to attach just a little bit above where the eye is. And we don't need to sew these on particularly tightly, they just need a couple of stitches. So I'm going to go through some of the fabric of the head here. Then make sure the ear is facing the right way. I'll sew through once, and then sew through the fabric of the body again. And that attaches the ear. We can go ahead and tie a surface knot. And then just like before, we can weave that in. And then let's repeat with the other ear on the other side. Alright, and that wraps up Patrick the Sheep's tutorial.